Hey, good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, I guess. It's morning right now for me. This is our chapter on leading, managing, and delegating. So take a minute and review the learning objectives for the chapter. And if any of the terminology is unfamiliar to you, make a note of the words and see if we discuss it as we go through the chapter. You're probably going to want to be familiar with the different terminology. Okay, management versus leadership. Managers think methodically. They search for problems, achieve goals, rely on control, and ask when and how. It can be reactive. They focus on systems and structures, and they work within the culture of the organization to do the right thing and try to reduce uncertainties. Leadership, on the other hand, thinks strategically, looks for opportunities, and they set and change goals. And I feel like for me, the biggest thing with leadership is they inspire trust and ask what and why. They are really more looking at their individual people on their teams. Leadership is proactive, innovative, focuses on people, shapes the culture, and does the right things. They widen options and alternatives. So now you have your different types of power. A good leader is someone who can lead and direct or motivate people to be the best they can be to achieve goals that have been set forward. So that's a good leader. Leaders have power that can either be explicit or implied. Explicit, usually they get their power from the position that they're working in. So that means this is your director, therefore they have the power. Implied leaders don't have a position of power, but they have a personality or an interactive style that makes people look up to them and follow them. So think about, leadership is one of the qualities we're looking at in nursing school. Are you displaying leadership? So how can you display leadership informally within the nursing program and within your sphere of influence? Okay, so leadership qualities. A bunch of different qualities here. Good or memorable leaders have the qualities listed on this slide. No, I'm sorry. I'm tired and I need more coffee. Good or memorable leaders have the qualities listed on this slide. Can you think of some leaders who could be defined as charismatic or dynamic? I know I have worked in corporate America for decades before I became a nurse and an instructor. And I can think of several who either were or were not. Leaders have to be comfortable with themselves, and they should be role models. Good leaders usually exude confidence and create a vision that can inspire people to get behind them. Leaders need to be knowledgeable, sometimes creative, and definitely flexible. Nurse leaders also need to know the politics of the institution that they're working for, along with the politics at the local, state, and national level for nursing, as healthcare seems to always have some sort of change or action happening with it. You all have the potential to be leaders in nursing. You've taken the first step in pursuing your nursing education. There are some basic skills needed for nursing leadership, and those are listed on this particular slide. The ability to know what you are capable of and how you are viewed by your fellow nurses is critical in leading. Take a moment and pause and read through these skills. They should make sense to you. There are many different leadership styles in healthcare, as there are really, this says in healthcare, but a lot of this would apply no matter where you work. especially if you work for a big corporation. So different styles can be used for different situations. So, or with different people. In autocratic leadership, the leader takes over all of the decisions and activities of the group. Most people don't work well day to day in these type of leadership situations because they don't feel involved in the decision making and the organization. This was the type of leadership that was prevalent when I was in nursing school, but that has evolved now into a more democratic style of nursing. There are times when autocratic leadership is necessary. For example, medical emergencies. You really need someone to take the clear leadership role and tell everybody what they need them to be doing in that moment. Or maybe you are brand new at something and you need someone to tell you step by step, here's what you need to do. So, none of these are bad by themselves, but sometimes you have to show flexibility and change your leadership style based on the situation. So democratic leadership or participative leadership levels, it kind of just levels the playing field, and there is participation from everybody involved, and the decisions and activities are shared. Goals are set as a group decision. This usually raises employee satisfaction and morale, as it allows the nurses to develop their skills and strengths. Laissez-faire leadership is non-directing and always allows the group the power. Task achievement is difficult with this style because there's no clear leader or direction. Now, it could work in some instances. Looking at healthcare today, I would say it's probably not a great idea to use this approach, because where I see this type of style working is where you have people that have a ton of experience and they're very self-directed and they know what to do. So they don't have someone breathing down their neck telling them how to do their job, and they're able to be creative and get it done. But if you have a bunch of people that are new, that type of leadership style is really not going to be very effective. Let's see. Servant leadership is a practice that is aimed at enriching the lives of individuals, organizations, and ultimately the world. These leaders have the motivation to serve through caring about certain causes or missions. So servant leaders, I feel like I work at Hospice of the Valley, and many of our leaders there are servant leaders. They really try to do what is right for the families and the patients that we take care of, as well as for the employees who work there. And I love working there because that is how the leadership style tends to be. Quantum leadership sees an organization and its employees as interconnected and collaborative. So think about an organization. Remember that as nurses, we are a piece of an interdisciplinary team. So in quantum leadership, we see our employees as interconnected. So how does nursing fit into the big picture? We're interconnected with respiratory, with the physicians, with medical social workers, with the CNAs. Who else? OT and PT. We're all interconnected, with the middle of that interconnectedness being our patient or our person-centered care. Transactional leadership is task and reward oriented. So the employees are rewarded by meeting or exceeded established goals or deadlines. So, hey, you guys, this month we are going to give you a pizza party at the end of the month if we don't have any falls on the unit. That to me is a transactional leadership, and that's measurable. Another way that could be transactional is, hey, we're focusing on, did you all do your pain assessments? So we're going to be looking at your charting, specifically every single patient you took care of this month. And if you chart your pain assessments for each one of your patients throughout the month, you're going to get a $100 bonus. That's transactional. So these leaders reward good behavior and punish negative behavior. So I guess you could say, if you do it, you're going to get $100. If you don't do it, we're going to write you up and you're going to be on disciplinary action on an action plan. This isn't ideal in healthcare because it doesn't allow the nurse to problem solve and be creative, really. It's just, here's your goal. And did you achieve it or didn't you? Transformational leadership can be inspiring. These leaders create stimulating environments and challenge themselves along with their employees. So they are usually very enthusiastic and they have a vision and a passion for what they're doing and trying to accomplish. So, you get in there, and I feel like a lot of times when you're new, it's the best time for you to see what doesn't look like it should be done the way it is. But when you are new, nobody wants to listen to you because you're the new guy. But if you keep a journal in your career and you write about what you're seeing and what you think should be changed later, when they ask you, hey, do you want to be on this committee? I sure do. I want to be on this committee because I have some ideas of how to close some gaps in patient care, or how to improve our patient safety or improve the outcomes. So that kind of leadership is very important. And they're usually open and honest, and they really care about their people. So transformational leadership, they're looking for, how can I make this place a better place for our patients, our employees, everybody that walks through these doors, that they say this is the place to be. They are usually the type of leadership that's encouraged in magnet organizations. So magnet hospitals are hospitals that attract and retain nurses who practice at a high professional level and have high job satisfaction. So they have self-governance and a magnet institutions. The magnet status is applied for through the American Nurses Association, and it's good for 4 years if they achieve that status. It's important because those institutions are shown to have better patient outcomes, higher patient satisfaction, shorter lengths of stay, a commitment to accountability and patient safety, and higher job satisfaction than non-magnet institutions. They have open communication policies and are always striving to grow and improve. So I just read that, but I had a thought when I was reading it, and I can't remember what it was because mold. Let me think about it for a second. Talk amongst yourselves. I can say this, and I don't think this is what I was thinking. Magnet organizations they want their nurses to have at least a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and they encourage their nurses to get certification in the area in which they work. So if you are in med-surg, then they encourage you to get your certification in med-surg nursing. Or maybe you're in critical care, so they want you to get your certification in critical care. And they reward their people for their improved and increased knowledge and for their loyalty and in staying in the position where they are, because they recognize that the more skills you have and the more experience you have and the more education you have, the better nurse you're going to be, which leads to all of those outcomes. Okay, the next slide here, the role of the nurse manager. So you can see what they are: planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling. The roles that nurse managers take is listed on the slide. The nurse manager must plan when problems are identified and continually plan for strategies to meet the demands of a changing healthcare environment. So they also have to organize staff and resources to meet patient needs and the organization's needs. That is a delicate balance. Probably part of the reason why I knew I did not want to go into management in the hospital setting, because I really want to make sure that my patients and my staff are at the right numbers so that everyone is happy and no one's burnt out and our patients feel like we're answering their call lights. And the organization at the other side, while they want to achieve all those things, obviously, they sometimes can't because they've got to meet the budget. So, everybody's got the right number of patients. We're having a great shift. And then all of a sudden before midnight, they say, oh, we got to send one of you home because we're overstaffed, but really we're right staffed. So I never really wanted to be in that particular position. So the managers hire, orient, develop, and schedule the healthcare team. And I don't always think that they do the orientation, but they make sure that the plan is in place so that the new hires have orientation. They direct staff to achieve organizational and patient goals, which is sort of what I was saying. It's a delicate balance between achieving the organizational outcomes and goals and our patient goals. They control the environment and are responsible for patient outcomes and keeping on budget. There are two types of management structures. In centralized management structure, the senior managers usually make the decisions, and then the people under them are responsible for implementing the decision. This is also called top-down management. And I feel like a lot of our healthcare organizations have this type of management style. A lot of that is because we're a 24/7, 365-day organization by design. I mean, we have to be open all the time. So it's hard to get teams of people that are willing and able to dedicate time to looking at things and closing gaps, or identifying gaps and then closing them. So instead, you have the top up here going, well, this is what I think the issue is. And then they decide that's what it is and they implement it. In decentralized management, decisions are made by the people closest to the situation, or the ones who would be impacted the most by the decision. And to me, that is the best way to do it. Because if you're not in touch with what's happening in the front line or on the floor in an organization, how can you know what needs to be changed or how it should be changed? You might have a great idea, but then I feel like you need to go and see for yourself and talk to some people that are doing the job, maybe shadow a few days, and then come up with your plan. These can also be in place together depending on the nature of the decisions that have to be made. Things like budgets are usually top down, where things like clinical issues can be made by the nurses providing the care. Conflict resolution strategies. Unfortunately, we have to have that, and there's good ways and maybe not so good ways to handle it. Conflict can exist on any nursing unit and at any level. On the individual level, it can occur between two coworkers or people from different departments in the healthcare setting. Group conflict can occur between two departments or professional groups. Organizational conflict can occur between two or more healthcare agencies. So I'm going to try to give you some examples of each one of these. So maybe you are trying to be super helpful and you go into a nurse's patient's room and you replace a bag of fluids for them. And they are one of those people that doesn't like you to touch their patients. And they find out you did that, and that could totally make them mad. And so now they come to you and say, why did you do that? And you think, oh my gosh, I was just trying to be nice and proactive and helpful. And they don't see it that way. They maybe see it that you're interfering in their patient care. So you could create some dissension there when that was never your intention. And I am giving that example because I've seen that. Then you have people from different departments in the healthcare setting. So maybe, I don't know, I can think of some. Maybe you work nights and you're having issues getting medications from the pharmacy. And so that can create some dissension. And maybe there's a gap that needs to be closed in the pharmacy, or maybe they're not aware that it's creating a problem for the nursing staff. So that's an opportunity right there to address that conflict in a proactive way. Group conflict, that was two or more departments or professional groups. Organizational conflict between two or more healthcare agencies. So here's a good one. Oftentimes working for Hospice of the Valley, a patient's family will call a nurse out, which will be me, and I'll go into a healthcare facility. Maybe it's a long-term care facility. And I will see some things that I'm like, oh, wow, I don't think I would put my family member here. So it puts you in an awkward position because I'm representing Hospice of the Valley. So I always want to be very professional, and I want to deal very professionally with the staff of that particular care agency because we have to work with that care agency. So I don't want to create dissension. So how can I approach something that I see in a way that builds the relationship rather than causing a conflict? So you're always looking for a way to have a win-win outcome. In healthcare, our aim should be to work together more effectively, not to defeat the other party. That's the same everywhere. Conflict resolution uses the problem-solving process and involves steps. The first step is to identify the problem or the issue. The next step is to generate a possible solution or multiple possible solutions. And then the third step is to evaluate the suggested solutions. Next is to choose the best solution. And then the 5th step is to implement the solution that you chose. Now, you're not done there, and I feel like a lot of times we are done there, but we have to evaluate it. If we don't evaluate it, how do we even know that it fixed it? So did we solve the problem? Informal negotiation is the next step if the problem solving does not resolve the conflict. So maybe, you as the nurse go down and meet with pharmacy because you feel like there's an issue. And you think you fixed it, but then the next week it's still an issue. So it's not fixed. So you're going to clarify the situation in your own mind and then set the stage and then conduct a negotiation. And then continue with offers and counter offers. And then agree on the resolution of the conflict. There are also some conflict resolution strategies that you can use. They are listed on the slide and also in the chapter in your textbook, which gives the definition of each of these strategies and some of the advantages and disadvantages of these. Pause and take a moment to review that. Change is part of everyone's daily life, and it can be expected or unexpected. Change is a common experience in healthcare due to the factors listed on this slide. So let's look at that. Increased number of chronically ill and older people. Of course, our baby boomers are the largest generation, and they are at retirement age. And because as our medical care has gotten better and our medications available to treat chronic conditions have improved over the years, we now have people living longer with multiple different chronic health conditions. So they become more of a challenge to take care of. If you have someone come in that has diabetes and kidney disease and heart failure, that is a lot more medications, a lot more education, and just a lot more to try to prioritize. Like, what do I need to do for this person? Then we have an increased role of government and industry in healthcare. If you don't think we do, we sure do. Rising cost of healthcare, we all know that's the case, and then changing patterns of healthcare delivery. I'm kind of excited about the changing patterns of healthcare delivery. So I know that CVS is buying up all kinds of things and creating their own little micro healthcare organization. Amazon's doing the same thing. And each one of them is, getting all their own specialists in their own little tiny world of healthcare. So it's just interesting to see. And then we have telehealth. I mean, that's a very big change in healthcare delivery. So some of those things are awesome. One other thing that changed in probably the last 20 years is healthcare costs went up so much that a lot of the bigger corporations moved to a HSA, health savings account. When they did that, and they also made it that you had to pay a certain percentage of the cost of your care, and you had in-network and out-of-network, providers. It made the consumer have to be more aware of the healthcare spending. Instead of it being like, oh, you just pay $25 to go to the doctor or $40 for a specialist. They made it so you kind of have to be involved in understand the costs involved in what you're choosing to do, which is kind of nice because I feel like the more the consumer is aware of the cost of something, the more they will advocate for change. So sometimes change can be good, and sometimes you can go, whoa, how did this come about? So just know that no matter how it comes about, you're going to see it all the time. Your textbook uses Lewin's change theory. He's identified 3 stages of change that are listed here. So change moves you out of your comfort zone. And this is described by Lewin as unfreezing when a need for change is realized. The moving phase comes after exploring and planning. And then the refreezing phase is when it is ingrained in your institution. So a huge change about 12 years ago was the move from paper to electronic health records. I feel like it was longer ago than that. That was really big. But now it's something that's expected to be in place. And really, when I say refreezing, I don't know if I like refreezing because we're always unthawing it and, kind of trying to make it better. So now that we have everybody on electronic charting, we are working to get it so that your healthcare records can be shared amongst multiple institutions. So when I first started as a nurse, we could only see the healthcare records with our hospital organization. So if you were at a Banner facility in Surprise and then in Gilbert and now you're in Mesa, I could see all of that. But I couldn't see if you went to St. Joe's downtown or if you went to Mercy Gilbert, because that was part of Dignity. And they are working closely to try to make their systems talk to each other so that they can more easily share medical records to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts. So if somebody just had a MRI done at Dignity, we are not going to redo that MRI 2 days later at Banner unless there's an indication or a change. Okay. The Tuckman theory is a social development theory, and that was developed by Edward L. Tuckman in 1965, and it explains how groups of people progress through a series of stages from forming to performing. We used this one a ton when I worked at American Express. I was a leader there, and whenever you're starting a new process or you have a new team, you go through these stages. So organizations use this theory of group development to help guide them through the process of development and changes. Planned change is purposeful and systematic. This usually takes place in an 8-step process. First, you recognize there's a need for change, identify the problem to be solved, think of possible solutions and analyze them, select what the best course of action to be, and then plan for the change to be implemented. I feel like in here, I don't know that it says it, if you want your change to be effective, you better have buy-in from the people that it's going to impact. Then you implement the change and evaluate the effects of the change. And then the last thing is you help stabilize the change. And this is also explained in detail in your textbook. Stabilizing the change is basically sort of like where you freeze the change. So a lot of these theories, they're different, but they're the same. It's a different way of saying it. And then this slide goes over some considerations a nurse manager should make prior to making a change. So take a minute and look at that. What is amendable to change? And I guess that's what's ready to change. And how does my group function? Are we working well together? And is the group ready for change? I better know my group pretty well, it looks like. And are these changes going to be major changes or small changes? And really and truly, if this change is going to make it so that I have a ton more work to do, I better be looking at how is my staffing in my group. All right. Resistance to change. How many of you can honestly say that you love change? I think in my 20s, when I was a leader in the airline and then at American Express, I was all about change. Like, I'm the one that they put over pilot teams to try new things and stuff because I loved that. But the older I've gotten, the more I just like things to be the way I want them. I mean, and I think most people are like that. I probably annoyed people when I was in my 20s looking back. They're like, who is this enthusiastic person? So people have a natural resistance to change. So many times as a nurse and a leader, you have to recognize that people are resistant to changes. The possible reason for this resistance can be that the person feels the change is a threat to themselves. They don't understand the need for the change. Their resistance to change in general. They don't buy into the benefits of the change, or they fear that they will have to take on more work or responsibility with the change. Those are all really valid reasons. So active resistance can take the form of aggressive actions or outright refusals to comply, written negative emails that attack and destroy the idea or the person who suggested it, quoting existing rules that make the change difficult or impossible to implement, or organizing resistance to the change. So encouraging other people to formally, send emails or bring it up in briefing, whatever. Passive approaches, and I feel like this is probably more what you see, And it probably is the one that undermines the most. The ones that are more vocal, at least you know exactly what you're facing, and maybe you just need to get that person that is being vocally against it, sit down with them and get them to be a champion of the change, and there, you fixed it. But passive approaches, these are harder to combat because you don't really see it, because it's kind of like on the down low. So passive approaches involve avoidance, canceling appointments to discuss the implementation, being too busy to make the change, agreeing to the change, but then doing nothing to make it happen, and then ignoring the entire process as much as possible. So your leader, or when you are the leader, you have to have good communication and open feedback about the change in order to have that minimal resistance. So in the healthcare industry, if you're working in a hospital setting, it's hard to have that really great communication and open feedback because, again, 24/7, 365, and you got about 15 minutes during briefing to talk about it. So how do you ensure that this change is something that everyone can get behind and understands the importance of it? You have to be able to relate the change to the person themselves and indicate how the change will be evaluated. And then you might have to provide incentives to make the change. So change is a pretty big deal when you're a leader. SWOT is a business management anagram that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I can't say that I ever used this in healthcare, but I used it when I worked as a leader at American Express. So it's a great analysis, and it's used to study the strengths and weaknesses relative to competitors, really. And then SOAR is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. And this is an analysis of it's a strategic planning tool. It combines data about the organization's current position, and then it combines that with people's ideas and dreams about its future so that you can build an energizing vision to work toward. So, oh my gosh, nurses really need to work together instead of against each other. And we don't do enough of that. We have a lot more power than we think we do. We have to consider the following factors. We need to jump on opportunities for change as the topics get attention in the government or the media. We need to get it together and agree with each other. Like, what can we agree on? And then there's strength in numbers. We'll be listened to if we speak up. We have over 3 million RNs in the United States, and we should be using that leveraging power. Think about the American Medical Association. They have so much power. They have lobbyists in the government, in the House and in the Senate, and really nothing happens unless they agree with it. Why don't we have the same thing? The public rates nurses as having the highest ethics in any profession, so we're trusted in our judgments. Advanced degree nurses are growing in numbers super fast, so that also gains respect. Because nursing looks at the whole person and it's science-based, we carry a unique perspective as a healthcare provider. And lastly, consumers are getting educated and demanding change. So pay attention and be willing to stand up for the profession you work for. Okay, evidence-based strategies to improve leadership skills. Everything we try to do in nursing is evidence-based. So we can say that research has found strategies and guidelines that can help nurses to be more effective leaders. And remember, you can be intrinsically a leader or you can be informally a leader. So use clear communication and facts when you're communicating with staff. You can do that as a new grad. Gain education and competencies in leadership through training. Strive for a healthy work environment. Keep the staff engaged and encourage them to do their best work possible. Assist new graduates in moving into the new role of RN. I always say you learn as much or more in the first year of working than you did in all of nursing school, and we need to foster that growth. So I can say that I feel that my first experience was not the best. And it was the hardest year ever. So when you guys ask me, what was the hardest block of nursing school? First, I would tell you it's whatever block you're in. But the hardest block is block 5, which is when you're a new grad and you're working on the floor. You need to find a unit that is going to be supportive and helpful to you as you transition into your new role. There are a lot of challenges right now because a lot of nurses left the profession during COVID. And, you know, they retired because they were like, I don't want to get COVID. I don't want to bring this home to my family. Some people just left the profession altogether. Other people went and traveled. So it's hard to find a place where you have staff, where you have nurses that have been there long enough to really understand the culture of the organization and all of the different things that you need to know as the nurse. So find a good mentor and know who those nurses are that you can trust to help you and help answer your questions when you get out there. Because you have to, and then once you've been somewhere a while, be the champion for those new grads coming out to the floor. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox on that and we'll talk about patient care coordination. So I'm going to just start by saying that when someone's admitted to an organization, the first thing we are thinking of, or one of the biggest things we're planning for, is when are they going to get out of here and how do we make that happen in a safe way? So we establish goals and priorities for every day. We evaluate the goals in terms of the ability to meet the needs of the patients, establish a timeline, and allocate priorities to the hours in our workday, and then evaluate success or failure in managing time and use the results of the evaluation to direct the next day's priorities and timeline. That's a lot of words. But basically, our goal at the end of the day is I want my patient to be back to their baseline or as close to baseline as I can, and I want them to have as much functional capability as is possible. So maybe your patient came in and they had a stroke with right-sided deficits. Are they going to get back to their baseline? They might, because some people's symptoms will resolve with physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy. Other people, they have about a year to get back their function. Other people are never going to be back to what they were before they had a stroke or a CVA, which is a cardiovascular accident. Did I say that right? I feel like I didn't. CVA, stroke, whatever, doesn't matter. It's a brain attack. So their brain has some deficits based on a blockage or a bleed that caused it to not get oxygen. So how can I get them back to a place where they are at their highest level of function? And that is, if they can do something, then let them do it. Make sure they're getting their therapy. Make sure we're getting them up. So we're evaluating. We have, however many patients. I can't sit with this patient all day, but I can make sure that all of the team, my interdisciplinary team, is engaged and that everyone has the goals and that the patient is actively engaged and understands and buys in and wants to improve. And then we just work with them and try to reevaluate those goals through our nursing process until we can get them to graduate to the next level of care or go back home. All right. Clinical nurse leader role. A clinical nurse leader, or CNL, is a master's prepared nurse who is certified. Now, I don't know if they have to be certified. Maybe they do. This nurse works with the healthcare team to facilitate, oversee, and coordinate care that we give to patients. The other roles a CNA fills are listed on this slide. Take a minute and read through those. I can say that a lot of these people are educators. So they might be your diabetes educator or your chronic disease, like you just got diagnosed with heart failure. They are going to come in and educate your patient more in depth. Or maybe they're educating the whole staff more in depth. Okay. You guys really need to understand the delegating that comes with nursing. And I'm looking at the slide right now. This is probably a pretty good slide to know, but we're also going to share with you some action verbs that you can look for when you have questions that'll tell you whether or not, like if you see assess, know that that's the nurse's job. If we say, you can't send the CNA in to ask the patient if they have pain because that's an assessment. Now, does it ever happen in the real world? Your CNA comes and says, hey, this patient says their pain's an 8 out of 10. It happens all the time. But in NCLEX world, the nurse does the assessment. So the UAP or the CNA or the NA, whatever you want to call the person, the UAP stands for unlicensed assistive personnel. Oftentimes, these are the CNAs, and they work in an assistive role to the RN. They are really our right hand, or left hand if you're left-handed. Delegation is an integral part of the role of the nurse, and we can't do it all. The American Nurses Association has specified that RNs may not delegate the following tasks, and you really have to know these. The initial nursing assessment. Follow-up assessments if nursing judgment is indicated. Nursing diagnoses. Decisions and judgments about outcomes. Formulation and approval of a patient plan of care. Interventions that require professional nursing knowledge. Decisions or skills, and decisions and judgments necessary for the evaluation of patient care. The nurse must consider several factors before delegating care. They must evaluate the patient's condition and how stable they are. So if they're stable, they can delegate that patient to an LPN if they have an LPN, which is a licensed practical nurse. If they are not stable, they need to keep them in their care. So how complex the delegated task is. If it's too complex, maybe it shouldn't be delegated. You better know what the skills are of the person you're delegating to, and if they have the ability to do that skill. Let's see. Could harm come to the patient if the nurse themselves does not do the task? Is there problem solving involved? And how much interaction with the patient must occur with the task? How many patients do I need to care for today? What is the level of experience and training of the unlicensed assistive personnel? And is the outcome pretty predictable? And what other needs does my patient have? Here are the American Nurses Association guidelines for delegating care. Take a moment and review those. So I also want to mention that every state has their own scope of practice. And if you are going to be a travel nurse, it's your responsibility to know what's on that state's scope of practice. Patient's condition, complexity of the activity, potential for harm, degree of problem solving, and innovation necessary, level of interaction required with patient, and availability of professional staff to accomplish workload, qualifications and capabilities of the unlicensed assistive personnel, stability of the patient condition, complexity of the activity to be delegated, and the potential for harm, the predictability of the outcome, and the overall context of other patient needs. Leadership training can be done through several resources. One of these is mentorship. I strongly suggest you have a mentor. Mentors can provide support, information, and networking. A mentor is key in assisting less experienced nurses to take on additional knowledge and responsibilities. They'll also help you navigate if you have any type of conflict or perceived conflict, or if you see something and you don't understand. If they've worked in your organization a while, they know the culture. So they're a great person to be a sounding board. Preceptorship is like mentorship, where an experienced nurse takes on a new nurse to guide and educate the nurse. Many professional organizations recognize the need to develop nurse leaders, and many of them have educational programs offered or opportunities to gain experience in leadership. Continuing education courses can also be geared toward developing leadership knowledge, and it's even easier now to obtain these courses because a lot of them are on the internet. As a nurse, it is essential that you acquire time management skills. I will say to you that when you're a new grad, if you're new to healthcare, you're going to spend at least your first 6 months very task-driven, because you are going to feel like you have way more tasks than you can actually complete in a 12-hour shift, or whatever your amount or hours of your shift ends up being. First thing you need to do is set goals. So when you're taking tests in nursing school and just the sheer volume of information you have to learn, we spend a lot of time talking to you about which patient's your priority, or prioritization is huge. A lot of it is because you have to develop that critical thinking so you can do all of this. So goals help clarify where you want to spend your time and energy. Set your short and long-term goals. Then you organize your work. So this can be done using a time inventory to help you figure out where you're spending all your time and eliminate the time wasters. You should work on the most difficult task when you have the most energy. Make a to-do list and prioritize the tasks in the order of importance. Determine how much time each task will require, and then when it has to be completed. If you find yourself postponing an item for several days, decide whether to give it top priority the next day or drop it altogether. Create a daily worksheet to help organize your day. Provide yourself with reminders of various tasks and when they need to be done. So without a type of schedule, you are likely to drift through a day or shift from one activity to another in a disorganized way. Learn to say no nicely and how to delegate and plan the night before. Lastly, evaluate your success or failure in time management and learn from your mistakes and try to do better the next time. So this goes for nursing, and it really goes for nursing school. Developing resilience. So Belinda and I talked about resilience is kind of going to be our word for the semester or maybe the year. I feel like in order to be a good nurse, you have to be able to display resilience. So what does that mean? We're going to have really hard days, and we're going to have days where we think, why in the world did I decide this is what I wanted to do? And that is probably true in a lot of professions, but I feel like it's really true right now in nursing. So if you can start your day and end the day with gratitude, think of the things that you're grateful for at the beginning and the end of the day. It just gives you a positive mindset. Practice mindfulness. So what does that mean? What does mindfulness mean? So if you're sitting here listening to this lecture, tune into your 5 senses. What can you hear? What can you see? What can you smell? What can you touch? What are the things around you? And just be aware of them. Don't judge them, but just be aware. That's mindfulness. Appreciate that we are all limited in our capabilities. So avoid judging others, but maybe just assess where someone is in order to maybe assist, but don't judge. Appreciate the power of connectedness and presence. I feel like now that I work for Hospice of the Valley, this is more important than ever. It's always been important, but I try to form a connection with the families, especially when I'm, really all the time, when I'm doing a new admission. Being present is very important. So if it takes me 2 hours and I just sit and have a conversation with the family, I'm still going to gather the information I need, but I'm not doing it in a way that feels like I'm completing a checklist. I am sitting down and trying to understand individually what the goals are for this patient, and not only from the patient's perspective, but the family's, and trying to form a connection with them. And that goes for anywhere that you're working. It's just that in the hospital, you can't sit for 2 hours and form that connection. You're going to have to do it in different ways. I like this. Stop frequently to stretch and take deep breaths. I used to get massages once a month. That was one of the things I did for myself in nursing school. And my massage therapist would say, even cats get up and stretch. You have so many knots between your shoulders, or your lower back is tight as can be. I could tell you're just sitting and studying. You need to get up and stretch. So try to do that. One of the things I did is I bought a foam roller to do stretches. I also got a tennis ball, and I would put it up against the wall and do squats up and down with that behind my back to kind of help massage out the knots. And then taking deep breaths when you're sitting there. If you start to feel yourself getting anxious, those deep breathing and being present and experiencing mindfulness will help you to kind of overcome anxiety. And if you don't have anxiety, I feel like it's something that will happen to you at some point during nursing school because there's so much happening and so much learning. Reflect frequently on what brings you joy, which is that different than gratitude? Not much, but it's a different way of looking at it. So if you are journaling or if you are doing what I suggested early on in the semester, if you are scheduling your priorities, make sure that you're scheduling things that bring you joy, because it's easy to get bogged down in the task and forget to have joy in your life. And then keep positive and hopeful outlook. Don't get cynical, or if you start to feel like really negative, come talk to us. We'll try to help you with that. It's important that you develop that resilience, because you don't want to end up with clinical burnout. So clinical burnout, I feel like you probably hear about it all the time if you're in the healthcare industry already as a CNA or an MA or whatever your role might be. I'm sure you've seen it, but it's important to try to avoid it. And it's from chronic job stress. So if you're working in an organization that is, or always seems to feel like it is understaffed, then you probably are feeling a little more stress because you want to take great care of your patients. Otherwise, why did you become a nurse? But then you feel like, oh my God, I can't because I have 8 patients when I should have 6. So how do we avoid that chronic stress? So it says high personal costs for individual clinicians. Yeah, it's high personal costs for individual clinicians because you'll see it referred to as moral injury. I became a nurse so I could help my people. I could educate them. I could be caring and all of the things, whatever those things are. So if you feel like you're unable to do that, it's easy to just go, why did I do this? I quit. So it does threaten the achievement of healthcare quality goals. It's hard to achieve healthcare quality goals if we are unable to provide safe patient care. We're emotionally exhausted. Maybe this depersonalization, I like to say that is compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue. When you go in and you're like, oh my God, this person's pushing their call light for the 50th time. Or this person who has dementia is screaming, help me, help me, help me. And you just ignore them or you don't hear it. We depersonalize those patients. We don't want to do that because that person that's saying, help me, they're in despair. We should not be just going, oh, they have dementia, that's why they do that. No, we need to figure out how can we make them feel like they're in a safe place, really do a wonderful assessment of what is their pain like. Because maybe we could fix that by giving them Tylenol, but we don't even have it ordered. So don't depersonalize, stay present. And then clinical burnout is obviously a barrier to professional well-being. So try to form your resilience practice now so you can keep yourself in a positive mindset when you get out there. Sorry this lecture's so long. Hopefully you learned something from it. This concludes our lecture.